Hello, I'm Kaustav Roy, Senior Product Manager at Celigo. Today I'll demo the second phase of API management, the secure phase. What if you had all the flexibility you need to define the best-in-class security for your APIs? In the previous video, we have seen how to design, build and expose backend API services as managed APIs. And in this video, we'll see how you can manage the security and governance for those APIs using plans and policies to meet your organization's security and compliance standards. You can navigate to the Celigo API Management using the View in API option. Here you can see the pre-configured API key plan. So what are plans? Plans are access control layers that allow you to define how API consumers can subscribe to and use your API. Plans also allow you to align the security and governance controls you want to the various user communities for your APIs. And in order to subscribe to the API, an application is needed. Applications act on behalf of the user to request tokens, provide user information, and more. Let's see how you can do all this on behalf of your consumer. Add an application, enter a name and description. Let's say it's a mobile application. You can add a client ID which is only relevant for JWT and OAuth 2 plan types. Subscribe to the API. And click here to create the application. Navigate to the API. Open the API key plan. Go to subscriptions and validate the subscription request. Here you can see the API key has been generated. Now that you have this, you can test it with any tool of your choice. Let's do so with Postman. Make sure you're invoking the correct URL. Copy the API key. Paste it here. The key name should be Celigo API key. Hit send. As you can see, a success is returned. You can also apply additional governance to the plan using policies in Policy Studio. Policies are customizable rules or logic the gateway executes during an API transaction and can be applied to a specific plan or to a specific endpoint or even to the API in general. Policies generally fall into the categories of security, transformation, performance, and others. Let's say this plan caters to your business partners. You can add a quota policy in order to enforce restrictions based on consumption volume. Set the max request to 5 per month for the demo purposes. Now if you invoke this API more than 5 times, this error is returned as expected. An API should have at least one plan and can have multiple plans as well, each with different access control methods, usage restrictions, and even policy flows, which you might want to do based on the different groups of consumers for your API. Let's add a new JWT or JSON Web Token plan, which can provide additional protection and flexibility to your customers. Select this algorithm, which uses a secret key shared by the API publisher and the consumer. The resolve parameter is that secret key which is used for both generating the signature and validating it. Select Extract JWT Claims to extract and use the claims from the signature. If you want, you can add a rate limiting or a quota policy, create the plan and publish it. In order to consume the API using JWT, you will need to subscribe to the plan using an application. You can create a new one or use the existing application that we have here. You need to use an application which has a client ID in order to subscribe to the JWT plan. Create a subscription. Let's generate the JWT signature at jwt.io, simulating how your client applications will be doing it. Get the client ID from the application, add it to the payload, add the secret key, copy the JWT, go to Postman, ensure the URL is correct, the auth type is set to bearer token, enter the JWT and hit send. As you can see, it's a success. And if you change the JWT and try again, it returns an unauthorized error as expected. Now let's say you want to authorize users with a certain role to access the API using JWT. All you need to do is add the role-based access control policy and mention which role should be allowed to access the API. Then add the assign attributes policy add an attribute and a value in expression language format. This roles array will be extracted from the JWT signature. We'll see how to do that. Go to jwt.io, add that roles array in the payload. And add the value as admin, which you entered earlier. Copy the JWT and invoke the API from Postman using the new JWT. As you can see, it's a success. Now if you change the role from an admin to a read and try with this JWT, it gives an error as expected. Next, let's add a basic auth policy to allow API calls from applications that only supports this form of authentication. First, add a plan. In this case, we need not assign one of the out-of-the-box authentication types, but we are going to use Policy Studio to plug in an external auth provider. Hence, we are selecting a keyless plan. Add a resource by selecting the inline authentication provider, which is the identity provider or IDP required to authenticate users. Give a resource name, add a new user, and provide username and password. In Policy Studio, against this new plan, add a basic authentication policy. Add the new IDP that we just created. Now let's invoke the API using basic auth. Provide the username and password. And it's a success. And if you provide an invalid credential, it returns an unauthorized error. You can also add an OAuth 2 plan if you have an IDP of your own. OAuth 2 uses an authorization server to obtain and verify tokens, which are granted by the IDP. Now that we have examined all the plan types, let's do a review of some of the additional governance policies that are available in the Policy Studio. For example, IP filtering allows or denies API access to an IP address or a range of addresses. Regex threat protection prevents SQL injection and cross-site scripting attacks. SSL enforcement allows access only to requests with client certificate authentication. Data logging masking conceals sensitive data in the API logs. Resource filtering allows access to a specific resource determined by a path and a method, and so on. Lastly, here you can find the CORS configuration, which ensures only trusted domains can access resources in the backend. So in this video, we have seen how you can manage the security and governance for your APIs using plans and policies in Celigo API Management. Thank you for watching.